Stuka Joe here, and this is a sample game turn video. And this video was preceded by a preview video of this game and the Napoleonic Wars. This is a type of format that I intend to do more often, having an initial preview video and then one or more game turn sample videos. Now, this particular game, because of its mechanics, which are unusual, I think deserves showing more than one turn, especially when Napoleon doesn't start the game in the first turn. So we're going to set up the game for the 1792 scenario. That's the first turn of the game. Napoleon doesn't appear in that turn. And then we'll play one full turn, that first turn. Then I will play a number of turns off camera. Then I'll return and play another turn on camera when Napoleon is in the game. So let's take a look at the setup for the 1792 scenario. A cool feature of this game is this counter tray, and the units have a setup code letter in their backs so that we sort them out by letter and place them in the counter tray. Now, there's only two kinds of counters that remain with their backs showing, while on the counter tray, those are the cultural icons, the C's that you see there, and the other ones are the État clients, which are the J's. So now we're going to flip to their front sides all the remaining counters in the counter tray except the C's and the J's. And here we see all the counters that have to be face up. Let's take a look at the playbook for the setup for the 1792 scenario. And here we see the setup instructions for scenario 1, Bonaparte, 1792. Let's place the counters now in their respective sections of the map and the player aids according to the setup instructions. We have all the units and markers in their starting positions for the 1792 scenario. This is a solitaire game where the player takes control of the coalition of monarchies opposing the French Revolution and then Napoleon. And the game is places the player more in the view of the British, but the British alone can't win it. They need the help of Austria, Russia, Prussia, the French émigrés and the aristocrats and other minor nations throughout Europe to win. And you may ask, how do you win in this game? You have to force Napoleon to abdicate. We track whether Napoleon finally abdicates, and we win through the use of the Napoleon abdicates marker. Certain circumstances in the game will move that marker, and if it reaches the 16 box, we win. And if it does not reach the 16 box and we've played all 16 game turns, we lose. Let's take a look at the starting positions of the units and markers on the map. The map shows 5 nations, which is where most of the action and combat will take place in the game. These are France, Germany, Austria, Italy, and Spain. And you see that each of these nations has a die roll associated to it. And that goes from 1 to 5. Now, during each turn, there's going to be a nation that is termed or defined as the but nation. And but means in French goal or objective nation. And we see that for turn number 1, that but nation is France. And because it is the key or the most important nation in that turn, you're going to see that the French are going to allocate more resources, more troops to the but nation. Now we see that in France there is the terror marker that begins there, and we have the royalists. And that is a corps, a combat unit of French royalists that are fighting there in France. They are one of our allies. Moving now to Germany, we see that there's 2 corps there, 2 combat units, and both are émigré corps. These are French who emigrated outside of France to keep on fighting the revolution. They're pretty weak, 3 and 2 their strengths. The French, however, have their two named diplomats, Talleyrand and Reinhardt, in the green rectangle portion of Germany there. And you see there that you have a sign of £2 if Prussia is in the coalition each turn. If Prussia is in the coalition, we receive £2. And that is the case at the beginning of the game. Now let's take a look at what's in the Austria box. Nothing. Nothing begins there, but again, Austria begins in the coalition and we receive £2 for Austria. Then we see Italy, and we see the Pope there. And the Pope acts as a modifier, a positive modifier, which is good for us, the coalition, when we have to determine during a battle if light troops show up to the battle and if they show up to favor our side or against our side. So the Pope is a good influence for us, and he begins in Italy. Then we have Spain, which is empty. And you see there space connected to Spain, Portugal. So if our forces have to ever retreat from Spain, they don't retreat into France, which is the other adjacent nation. They would retreat into Portugal, and that's the main purpose of that Portugal space during this game. We see here the London space, which is our capital, our base. We have our 4 diplomats there, and we have a marker that indicates that we receive £4 for London each turn. Then you see a neutral force pool. That's where we place the units of nations that start neutral in the game. In this case, Russia is a neutral nation at the beginning of the game. We see in Ireland a £1 trade marker, and several other countries we see these kind of markers, and these are brown boxes, and these are places where minor wars can erupt. Minor wars can be a headache for us if we leave them unchecked, and you see that the number there in the hex represents the difficulty that we have to win the minor war. So to win a minor war in Ireland, the coalition needs a final die roll of 11 or more. The anchor symbol is, what it means is that control of the seas may impact a battle there, and we begin the game with control of the high seas, and we see there Nelson and the Royal Navy. If the French ever take control of the high seas, you'll see a French marker there. Now, turning our attention to Haiti, we have a £1 trade marker there, and also further to the south in the Cape of Good Hope, we also have a £1 marker. You see there that Spain starts as part of the coalition. So at the beginning of the game, Spain, Austria, Prussia begin in the coalition. Russia begins neutral. And we see here at Mysore and Egypt £1 trade marker in each. Now we see here at Corfu and the Balkans, as well as the Caucasus, and up here in Finland, Russian war markers. Russia enters the war only after it has been involved in these 4 wars, and that's the purpose of that orange track to the side. So Russia enters the war differently than the other nations. The other nations, we send diplomats to convince them to join the coalition. Russia has a different mechanism to enter the game. In this game, we use 2 randomizer cups, one to hold high politics chits. These are events that have to do with minor wars, popping out in different places on the map. So we use a randomizer cup to place those counters there and draw them during the turn. And also we use a randomizer cup to draw French corps that may appear at different nations and participate in battles or be under the command of Napoleon. Now at the beginning of this scenario, all French corps except the Imperial Guard start in the randomizer cup, and as to high politics chits, only the Treaty of San Ildefonso and 2 no war markers or chits start in the high politics randomizer. So we're ready to begin. We'll play turn number 1, which is 1792. Now, Napoleon will not be present in this turn. And we will go a little slowly to introduce new game mechanics. And then I will, as I stated before, play 2 or 3 turns off camera, and then I'll return and play another full turn, but with Napoleon on the map, and there we will move a little bit more at a brisk pace. This game uses up to 3 6-sided dice, and the French invasion table is actually printed in the back of the playbook in this game. I copied it and on cardstock, and I have it here because we will be rolling on this table. We also will be rolling on this other table, random accidents table, which is another form of random events that may occur. And in this table, we will roll just 1 die in turn on turn 1. Normally, you roll 2 dice once Napoleon is crowned emperor, and 3 when he becomes the old man. But since we're playing turn number 1, we'll only roll 1 die here. And here we see the detailed sequence of play card that comes with the game. We will be referring constantly to this card as we play each phase and each step. And we begin now with the high politics phase. So the first step in the high politics phase is to get money, that is pounds, and assign it to the treasury. And we have to watch out for the continental system, but continental system will not be in place in turn 1. And as we stated before, the treasury marker starts in the 0 box. We receive 4 pounds for London, 1 for the trade marker in Ireland, as well as 1 for the trade marker in Haiti. We also receive an additional 1 pound for the trade marker at the Cape of Good Hope, and 1 for each of the markers at Mysore and Egypt. We receive 2 pounds because Prussia is in the coalition, and 2 more pounds because Austria is also in the coalition. So we receive a total of 13 pounds, so we move the treasury marker to box number 13. Next, we move pounds from the treasury either to the minor war fund or to the admiralty budget. And note that once the money or the pounds go to the admiralty budget, later on we cannot reassign that money anywhere else. So we have 13 pounds. We're going to assign 4 pounds to the minor war fund, and that decreases our treasury to 9, and we will assign 2 pounds to the admiralty budget, and so far our treasury is now reduced to 7 pounds. Next, we designate the boot nation, and that is determined on a turn-by-turn basis as specified on the turn record track. We're in turn 1, and it states that the boot nation is France, and that's where we place the boot marker. Next step, we perform any printed events. And we see that the printed event for turn number 1 is Valmy. And we look up Valmy in the list of printed events in the playbook. And it reads, in a tiny battle near the German border, European aristocrats are shocked to discover that revolutionary France will actually fight for its existence. So we add Switzerland and the Cape of Good Hope and 1 random état to the High Politics Cup. And then we place the Russian nobility blocking scroll in the Russia status box. And we add the Switzerland and Cape of Good Hope minor war marker to the High Politics randomizer. And also we take the topmost face down état client and add it to the cup. These état clients are puppet states set up by the French, and in the game they have an effect on battle as to whether they can motivate people to fight for the French in the form of light infantry. And we take the Russian nobility blocking scroll and we place it in the Russia status box. Russia is neutral, but we have to eliminate that blocking scroll if we want Russia to join the coalition. Next, we draw and play 0, 1, 2, or 3 high politics chits, and that's determined on the turn record track. And we have to pay close attention in this particular case to État clients, because we just placed one face down into the high politics randomizer cup, and also any minor wars that may result, which are also in that cup. The number of high politics chits to be drawn in this turn is stated here, 2. So we draw the first chit from the high politics cup, and it reads War Switzerland. So a minor war erupts in Switzerland. So we have a minor war in Switzerland. In order for our side to win the war, we have to roll a final result of 12 with 2 dice, and we can add 1 to the die roll for each pound that we want to spend from our treasury. Now this minor war is on a territory that is strategically vital. That's why it has the Napoleonic wreath there. What that means is that if we win the minor war, we increase the Napoleon abdicates marker to the next box to the right. Conversely, if we lose, it goes 1 box to the left. However, we're beginning the game, it's at 0. It can't go to -1. So now we must decide if we will react and will commit any of our resources, namely pounds, to increase our chances in this minor war. We have 7 pounds, so we will spend a total of 5 pounds to increase the die roll by a +5 die roll modifier. So now we roll 2d6 and add +5 to see if we win this minor war or not. The result is an 8 + 5, 13, which is greater than the 12 in the hex. So we win the minor war. And the marker remains face up in the Switzerland box. And because it was strategically vital territory, the Napoleon abdicates marker is now in the number 1 box. We still have 1 more high politics chit to draw from the randomizer. So let's see what it is. And this is a no war marker. And this marker is discarded, and we'll keep discarded markers off the map. We go to the last step of the high politics phase, buy 1 additional high politics chit. If we want to buy one, it's going to cost us 3 pounds. We currently have 2 in our treasury, so we're not going to buy one. And with so many minor wars popping out, I don't see a reason to bring another one to our attention. So that's the end of the high politics phase. And now we go to the diplomacy phase. We roll 2 dice, and we place 2 French diplomats in a randomly determined nation. And there's a limit of 2 diplomats per green box. The French diplomats all start the game in the hotel, except the named French diplomats, which in this scenario start in Germany. So we roll 1 die for 1 diplomat to be assigned, and then another die for the second diplomat. So we roll 1d6. The result is a 5. So we place 1 unnamed diplomat in the green box of the nation that has the number 5 assigned to it, which is Spain. Now we roll 1d6 for the second diplomat, and the roll is a 1. So this one is placed in the green box of France. Now to the counter diplomacy phase. Here we can use our diplomats to debate French diplomats, that is basically to get them out of nations where they are, or to remove lost minor wars. We haven't lost one yet, but give us a chance and you'll see we'll lose a couple of those. or to align neutral or surrendered countries to our side. Well, all countries are currently on our side except Russia, which does not use the procedure of persuading it to join our side through diplomats. So let's go to the first step. Here we debate French diplomats, and this costs £1 per diplomat that we send to debate. Currently, we have only £2 left in our treasury. The French have two named diplomats, Talleyrand and Reinhardt, in Germany. These are a little harder to debate against than unnamed diplomats. Diplomats in this game attract French forces. There's going to be a time when French forces will be deployed on the map, and there will be one French corps placed per diplomat in any of these nations. So if we do nothing, we'll see a French corps placed with the diplomat in Spain, another one with the diplomat in France, and two French corps placed with the diplomats that the French have in Germany. So we will spend £1 to send one of our diplomats to debate. We will send one of our diplomats, but which? We have four diplomats: Metternich, Rasumovsky, Hardenberg, and Castlereagh. And you see their top number is their debate number. And Metternich and Castlereagh have a rating of 4, so they're our best debaters. And the £1 is just a reminder that it costs £1 to send them to debate. So we will send Metternich to Germany to debate against Reinhardt. For our diplomat to be successful, he has to roll 1d6 and roll equal or less than his debate rating, in this case 4 or less. And because he's debating a named French diplomat, the rating of that diplomat is added to the die roll. So we need to roll a 1, 2, or 3 because we're going to get a +1 die roll modifier in order for Metternich to win the debate. So we roll 1d6, and the roll is a 5 modified to a 6, so Metternich fails to win the debate against Reinhardt, and both diplomats stay in their places. Next, we can remove Lost Minor Wars if we send a diplomat in a charm offensive, and if the diplomat is successful, the marker for a Lost Minor War, which would be the minor war marker flipped to its backside, would be flipped to its front side, and we wouldn't have the effect of losing the minor war, but there's no Lost Minor Wars so far. So the next step is to align neutral or surrendered countries. There is no neutral country at this time to bring to our side. Russia, as I stated before, enters the coalition through a different procedure. So now we move on to another phase. This is the Grande Armée phase. And here we will be drawing French corps from the randomizer, the French Corps Cup. We start by drawing randomly 4 French corps and placing them in France. Here's the French Corps Randomizing Cup. We will draw them off camera and show them to you and then place them where they go. So we drew 1 cavalry and 3 infantry corps. The number on the counter is the strength of the unit, and there's a dot. The red dot means that it is a vulnerable unit. It can be eliminated by a procedure that is found later during the turn. And the white dot means that it cannot be eliminated. It is immortal. It really is a way of reflecting that its commander, in this case Murat, did not die during the Napoleonic Wars. It's a way, an elegant way of keeping him in the game. So we place the newly drawn units in France, and we will place separately the cavalry unit because we have to consult to see if there's cavalry in each of these nations later on during any battle that may occur. Next, we place 4 French corps in the Boot nation. Again, we randomly draw 4 French corps. 4 infantry corps, strengths of 6, 5, 4, and 4. And we place them in the boot nation, which is also France, and we place them next to the boot marker. And why is that? Because in some instances, the units that were received as a result of a nation being the boot nation may be transferred or moved to another nation during the turn. Now we place any required diplomatic forces, that is, 1 corps per diplomat in any nation. So we randomly select 1 corps to be placed in Spain. It's an infantry corps with a strength of 6. And we draw 1 corps to be placed in France. And that's a cavalry corps with a strength of 6. And finally, we draw 2 corps to be placed in Germany. 2 infantry corps with a strength of 3. Now we have to roll on the French invasion table. So more French corps are on the way. These are randomly selected. And note that in this particular instance, the Spanish ulcer event or the Fra Diavolo will not occur in this turn. Now we will roll 1d6 and add the number corresponding to the current turn, in this case 1. The result is a 4 modified to a 5. So we place 3 French corps in Germany, 2 in Italy, and 1 in Spain. So we pick 3 corps randomly from the cup and place them in Germany. And these are infantry corps with strengths of 5, 6, and 6. And we place 2 corps in Italy, 2 infantry corps with strengths of 4 and 6. And we place 1 in Spain, and this is a cavalry corps with a strength of 4. And that's the end of the Grande Armée phase. We go now to the coalition phase, and here is when we purchase our forces, place them on the map, and then we roll to deploy Napoleon if we were playing any turn but turn 1. Napoleon doesn't show up in turn 1. So we begin by purchasing and deploying duchy forces. Duchy forces begin the game in the player force pool. These are the forces of minor powers or countries which are allied to our side. These are purchased in blocks of up to 3 units, and each block costs £1. And we will spend the last pound we have in our treasury to purchase a block of duchy forces. Now there's duchy forces with strengths of 3, 2, 1, so you may say, well, just pick the 3s. Well, yes, but duchy forces may remain in the nations where you place them, contrary to forces of major nations, which you have to remove them and place them in the force pool again. So you want to make sure you give good use to those forces that you have and not use all your higher strength ones first in just one nation. So we're going to pick a block of a 3, a 2, and a 1. And we see the situation here. The French are attempting to gain control of Germany, Italy, and Spain. Duchy forces cannot be placed in France, and there's special rules to place our units in France. We have to place duchy forces that we purchase in one block in one nation. We can't spread them around. So it seems that the big fight in this turn will be in Germany, so we will place this group of duchy forces there. Next, we deploy coalition forces. We don't have to pay for these forces, but we can only place them in nations where they're allowed to be quote-unquote built, and each nation has a code that tells us which particular nations can be built there. For instance, here in Italy, we can place British, Russian, and Austrian units. Note that Prussian units cannot be placed there. It's time to place our forces, those of Prussia, Britain, Spain, and Austria. It had left the Prussians in the counter trade. To place our forces, we have to check the color key there in the green box to see if we can place a particular nations' force there. In Spain, we can place British and Spanish forces. In France, we can place British, Russian, Prussian, Austrian, and Spanish forces. Of course, the Russians are neutral. And in France, there's special rules. We can only place units in France if the Paris marker, which is currently in the W box of the tray, but here it is, if the Paris marker is in France, which is not, or if France is the boot nation, which it is. But currently, there's not a lot of incentive to place units in France. The French are very, very strong there. And the Royalists, which are our only allies there, are really in a bad situation. So we start with Spain, and we'll place both Spanish corps there, and also a British cavalry corps. We're going to use the optional cavalry rules in battles. We'll explain that when we get to the battles portion of the turn. In Austria, there are no French units. It's highly improbable that we will see any there because Napoleon is not here in this turn. So we're just going to place one weak Austrian unit to ensure control of Austria. The bulk of the French forces are in France, 40 strength points, and in Germany there's 23. But so far we haven't assigned any of our forces to Italy. So we will place our remaining 3 Austrian corps with a total strength of 13 combat factors, and a British cavalry corps with a strength of 6. That leaves us with 4 Prussian corps. 1 is a cavalry corps and 3 infantry corps, and a 6-strength British infantry corps. Those forces total 22 combat factors, which will not be enough to gain an advantage against those French units in France, so the Royalists are on their own. And we will place the remaining British and Prussian units in Germany. So now we resolve the battles, and we resolve them in the order that we decide. We're going to have battles in Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. We start with the battle in France, which has no hope of being won for our cause. But why do I want to play this one first? In order to see if I draw more French cavalry away from the other places that are important into France. So we start with the battle sequence. We're playing with the optional cavalry reaction rule. So we have to determine if French cavalry units from other nations react and go to France. The only other nation that has cavalry, French cavalry, is in Spain. So we have to roll 1d6, and on a roll of 1 to 5, the unit reacts and is moved to France. But there's modifiers that may apply. If the nation where the cavalry is moving into has coalition cavalry, there's a +1. That doesn't apply. If the nation from which the French cavalry is moving out of has coalition cavalry, there's a +1. So here there's a +1 on account of this British cavalry unit, and there's a +1 if the nation to which the cavalry is moving into is not adjacent to the one in which it is originating. That doesn't apply because Spain is adjacent to France. That would happen if this cavalry unit would be reacting to combat in Germany, for example. So we have a +1 die roll modifier, and successful reaction entails 1 through 5. So we roll 1d6. And the roll is a 2 modified to a 3. So Grouchy's French cavalry unit successfully reacts and is now in France for the battle. And there's no more cavalry to roll for. And of course, I mean, on the French side, if we wanted to, we could check to see if our cavalry reacts and moves to France, but we've given France for lost in this turn. We will not sacrifice our cavalry in other places to help the royalists in this one. So next is the step where light infantry is called, and we determine if it will help the French or the coalition. And that's where these fervor markers come into play. Fervor represents the enthusiasm of people throughout Europe for the French Revolution, and that enthusiasm would translate into them providing troops for Napoleon. And in the game, that's reflected in the light infantry table, which we see down here. We have to determine the fervor that applies for this particular attack, and this combat is in Spain. And we see that Spanish fervor is 12. So we locate the 12 row on the light infantry table, and we roll 1d6. But before, we have to check to see if there's any modifiers that apply. There's no état client markers here for the French. The Pope is not in France, so there's no modifiers. So we roll now 1d6. If the result is FD, French dominance, that means that we will only roll one die to determine the battle results. And here, the higher the number, the better for us. The lower, the better for the French. So one die is not good for us. If the result is FA, French advantage, we roll 2 dice. And if the result would be NA, which cannot happen in this row, we would roll 3 dice. So we roll 1d6. The result is a 2, French domination. 1 die will be rolled to determine the final result. Now, if Napoleon would be present in this combat, and he would be at the stage where he is the emperor or the old man, we would roll to see if he commits the Imperial Guard. But Napoleon is not even present in this turn. So now we determine the difference in strength points. We add all the French strength points and then the coalition strength points. Well, coalition strength points here is just 3. The French have 44 strength points. We have 3. So the difference is 41. And if the French have more strength points than us, we subtract the difference from the die roll. If we have a higher strength than the French, we add the difference. So we subtract minus 41 from the die roll. And note that on the light infantry table, we obtain this result, French domination. So we roll only 1 die, and it has to be the white die, because in these situations, if the roll is a 1 or a 2, there's the possibility of a pursuit, which is additional combat after this one. So we roll 1d6. The result is a 2, and we modify it with a minus 41. So the result is minus 39. And the result is less than 0. French pursuit. All coalition forces retreat, and the French may pursue if the white die is 1 or 2. Yes, they will do so. The die result was a 2. So now we have to choose where we're going to retreat the royalists. And the problem is that the French will pursue, so they'll bring the host of that French army minus 1 unit to keep control of France into the nation into which the royalists will retreat. The royalists could retreat into Germany and ruin our chances there of a victory, or they may retreat into Italy and also ruin our chances there of winning. And the other alternative is to retreat into Spain. What it probably means is that wherever they retreat, we will lose the battle there. And losing the battle in one of these nations will cause that nation to surrender, most probably. So we don't want to lose Prussia, which has substantial forces. Italy has no forces in the game. Spain does. So the royalists retreat into Italy, and now France, or the French forces, pursue them. And as stated in the rules, the French, when they pursue with all of their corps from the previous battle, minus 1 staying behind. And they do so if the total strength points of all French units in the refuge nation, which would be Italy, would be higher than the total of all coalition strength points in the refuge nation. We don't even have to add that up. It would be obvious that the French would have more strength points. So the French move all of their units, leaving one 4-strength infantry unit in France. And now the French have their army concentrated in Italy. And we resolve that battle now. Now we start with cavalry reaction. We check for other French cavalry. In the other nations, there's none, so there's not going to be any cavalry reaction on the French side, and we're not going to bring any cavalry to this massacre here. Next is that we roll for light infantry. And note that the Pope provides a +2 die roll modifier, which is favorable to our side. We locate the Italian fervor marker. It's at level 14. We roll 1d6 and add 2 on account of the Pope. The result is a 5 modified to a 7, which anyway goes off the table. So we use the 6. French advantage. The French roll 2 dice. Calculate the differential. The French have 55. We have 22. So the differential is a -23 die roll modifier. So with the -23 die roll modifier, we roll 2d6. 8 minus 23, that's a -15. The result is French pursuit. All coalition units retreat. The French may pursue on a white die of 1 or 2. White die is a 3, so there's no French pursuit. According to the rules, all coalition forces must retreat from Italy to Austria. And there is no pursuit. So the French won actually 2 battles here. The battle in France and Italy. The victory in Italy increases Italian fervor to 15. The victory in France would increase it also, but it cannot be increased beyond 16. Still have 2 battles to solve, Germany and Spain. And let's go to Spain. French have a strength of 6, coalition 15. Now we check to see if French cavalry units in other nations appear in Spain. In Italy, the French have 3 French cavalry units. We roll 1 die for each of the units. On a 1 through 5, they reach Spain, but there's a +1 die roll modifier because notice that Italy is not adjacent to Spain. So we roll first for the Bessières unit. A 3 modified to a 4, so Bessières is moved to Spain. Now we resolve the next cavalry units. Grouchy's corps, we add 1 to the die roll. A 3 also modified to a 4, so Grouchy also appears in Spain. Now we roll for Murat's corps. 1d6, we add 1. A 2 modified to a 3, so he also appears in Spain. Now we can roll for any of our cavalry units that we want to move to Spain, but notice that we can only move into Spain British and Spanish units. The only British cavalry that we have so far that is not in Spain is in Austria. So Austria is not adjacent to Spain. There's a +1. We roll 1d6. We need 1 through 5. The roll is a 2 modified to a 3, so Uxbridge's cavalry corps makes it to Spain. And now we proceed to roll on the light infantry table. Spanish fervor is 12. No modifiers apply. We roll 1d6. The result is a 2, French domination. We only roll one die, the white die. Let's determine the difference between both forces. Our coalition forces have a total of 21 combat factors. And the French also have 21 combat factors. So the differential is 0, and we roll 1d6. We roll one die, the white die, and the roll is a 2. And there is no differential to be added or subtracted, so the final result is 2. And as we see here, the final result is French glory. All coalition units are eliminated. So we eliminate all coalition units and place them all in the casualties box. So the French have won the battle in Italy. Winning the battle adds 1 to Italy's fervor level, which is now at the maximum level of 16. And now to the battle for Germany. And we must roll for cavalry first. The French have 3 cavalry units in Spain, and we roll to determine if they show up in Germany. There's a modifier of +1 because Germany is not adjacent, and another +1 because the Prussians in Germany have cavalry. So we roll first for Murat. 2 + 2, 4, so Murat makes it to Germany. Now we roll for Grouchy. 3 + 2, 5, so he also makes it to Germany. Now we roll for Bessières. 4 + 2, 6, so he stays in Spain. Now we check the light infantry table. Battle is in Germany. German fervor is 14. So we locate that row in the light infantry table. There are no applicable modifiers. We roll 1d6. The roll is a 5, French advantage. We roll 2 dice. We have 33 in combat strength, including the émigrés, and the French have 32. So we get a +1, and we roll 2 dice. One has to be white. The roll is a 6 + 1, 7. And a 7 is a French exchange. All units on both sides are eliminated. Only the strongest French unit survives, and with that, France wins that battle. So all our units are eliminated except the émigré units by special rule. The eliminated units are placed in the casualties box. The émigrés go directly to the counter tray. We place them here in box O. Because the French win the battle in Germany, German fervor is increased by 1 and is now at 15. We finished the battle phase, resolved all battles. Now we go to the gentleman phase. We check for Austrian, Prussian, or Russian surrender. In this case, Austrian or Prussian surrender. There's no French units in Austria, so the Austrians do not surrender. But in Germany, the story is different. There is only French corps in Germany, so Prussia surrenders, and we change the Prussian status marker from Prussia coalition to Prussia surrender. Next, we try to win over cultural icons, but this doesn't apply because there are no cultural icons on the map in nations where there are French corps. All cultural icons are face down in their box in the counter tray. Now we go to the abdication phase, and we determine nation control and move the Napoleon abdicates marker if necessary. In this step, we check to see if the Napoleon abdicates marker increases by 1, and that happens if we control 3 nations and one of them is the boot nation. In this step, we see if we increase the Napoleon abdicates marker, and that happens if we control 3 nations and one is the boot nation. Well, we only control 1, Austria, so we didn't meet that objective. Now, the Napoleon abdicates marker is decreased by 1 if we fail to control those 3 nations, including the boot marker, and there are no French units in the casualty box. And we check the casualty box and there's no French units there, so the Napoleon abdicates marker is reduced by 1. So it is moved from the 1 box to the 0 box. Now we check for victory or defeat. Of course, this is turn 1. We still have 15 more turns to get that abdication marker to level 16. Now we perform nation fervor modifications. So if a nation is controlled by us, we decrease that nation's fervor by 1, and that happens only in Austria. So Austrian fervor goes from level 12 to 11. If a nation only has French or French allied units, its fervor increases by 1. That happens in France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. We cannot increase French or Italian fervor anymore. It's at the maximum level of 16, but we increase German fervor to 16 and Spanish fervor to 13. Now we recall the diplomats for consultations. All our diplomats go to the London box, and we return Napoleon and Josephine if they were on the board to Napoleon's bed. That doesn't apply. So we return Metternich to London. And note that French diplomats remain in place. So Talleyrand and Reinhard remain in Germany, and we have 2 unnamed diplomats, 1 in Spain and 1 in France, and they stay where they are. Next, we would restore all flipped or delayed cores. We don't have any flipped cores or delayed cores. Those are cores that are on the turn record track awaiting entry into the game. Next, we would roll for French casualties if there would be any French units in the casualties box, but there are none. Clear the deck. We return all French corps to the French Corps Cup and all our units to the force pool, except for any duchy forces of our choice that we want to leave in the nation where they are, and any royalists and emigres to the counter tray. In this case it would be royalists. So we move all French units in the nations that are shown, and they are placed back into the French Corps Cup. Now we place our units that are on the map in the nations boxes and also in the casualty box, and we return them to our force pool. And the royalist unit goes back to the counter tray. Now we can transfer funds from one fund to another, but no funds may leave the Admiralty budget. And we will transfer the funds from the minor war fund. We're going to transfer £2 to increase our treasury to 2, and now we have £2 in the treasury, in the war fund, and in the Admiralty budget. To the accidents phase, this is another way of saying random events phase. We roll for random accidents using the accidents table on the reverse side of the card. Well, I printed it anyway. We roll 1 die at the start of the game, so that's just going to be 1 die in this turn, turn number 1, and we apply the results of each accident. So we have here the random accidents table, and we only roll 1 die and we apply the results. And you see there's more than 1 result. There's 3, 4, sometimes 5 results. So we roll 1d6, and the roll is a 3. we have the following accidents or random events: Barbary pirates, French intrigues abroad, cultural icon, nationalism, XYZ affair, peace of Basel, and irreligious fanatism, and reign of terror. So we have a bunch load of events coming up right now. Barbary pirates: if the Royal Navy or French fleet are in the high seas box, we flip that counter to its other side. Therefore, nobody rules the waves in the next turn. So we flip the Royal Navy counter, and nobody will rule the waves. That means that any foreign war which has an anchor symbol, we will not be able to affect that war positively because we don't rule the high seas for now. The next event is French intrigues abroad. So we have to flip either Metternich or our diplomat Castlereagh to their backside, meaning that we won't be able to use whichever one we select. We will flip Metternich. Next accident is cultural icon. So we select the topmost face down cultural icon counter. We flip it, we reveal it, and place it in its home country, Beethoven. So he goes to Austria. And the next accident is cultural icon. We place the topmost face down cultural icon after flipping it in its home country, Beethoven, and he is Austrian. So he goes in the Austrian box. And Beethoven will stay in Austria until he defects to the coalition. And of course, we are reminded in the rules that Beethoven was German, but he played in Austria a lot. So he's in Austria. The next accident is nationalism. French patriotism backfires as other Europeans realize they can be patriotic too. We roll for a random nation and decrease its fervor by -2 in the nation roll, unless the nation rolled is France, in which case we increase the fervor. So we rolled a 2. So nationalism occurs in we reduce German fervor by 2. And German fervor is now at 14. The next accident is the XYZ affair. And this event can only happen successfully once in the game. Revolutionary France and the United States almost came to blows over French piracy in American waters. So we roll one die only once in the game. On a 6, a quasi-war escalates and we move the Napoleon abdicates marker 1 box up and discard the USA minor war chit if it hasn't been played, and therefore it can never occur if we roll a 6. So we roll 1d6. And the roll is a 5. So no quasi-war happens. And we keep the U.S. minor war chit in the cup. The next event is the Peace of Basel. And this event can only happen once. This event occurs if there are no duchy forces in Germany, and there are no duchy forces in Germany. So Prussia surrenders, and the Peace of Basel blocking scroll is immediately placed in the Prussia status box. That's going to make it harder for Prussia to come back to the coalition. The next accident is irreligious fanatism, and it happens in France, and we check to see the state religion in France box, and it says atheist, and the following occurs. We place the terror marker in the France green box. Well, it's already in France anyway. We'll just place it in the green box. And in addition, the Royalist Corps appears in France, and 2 Émigré Corps in Germany. So we place them, and this is basically how the game started. We reduce fervor in France by 1 and in all the other nations by 2. And the last accident is Reign of Terror. If the terror marker is on the map and it is currently in France, we roll 1 die to randomly place it in another nation. If we roll a 6, it stays in France, and we reduce fervor in that nation by the amount indicated by another die roll. So let's roll to see where the terror is applied. And the roll is a 3. And that is Austria. Now we roll to determine by how much we reduce fervor in Austria. So Austrian fervor is now at 6. So we have reached the last phase, end of turn, and we advance the game turn marker to the next turn and return to step A. So now we move the game turn marker to turn number 2. So we come to the end of this video, and we will play 2 or 3 turns off camera, and we'll return with another full turn. This time you'll see Napoleon in the game, because after all, the game's called N for him. And we'll play 1 more turn. So I hope that these videos give you an idea of how the game plays and what the game has to offer. This is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.